Namaste, Dhanava Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 4, Text 32. Evam Triloka Guruna Sandishta Shabhayonina Padharyashram Asadya Harimije Samadhina. Shukadev Goswami informed the king that Uddhava, being thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of all Vedic knowledge and the spiritual master of the three worlds, reached the pilgrimage site of Bhadrashrama and engaged himself there in trance to satisfy the Lord. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is factually the spiritual master of the three worlds, and he is the original source of all Vedic knowledge. It is very difficult, however, to understand the personal feature of the absolute truth, even from the Vedas. His personal instructions are needed in order to understand the personality of Godhead as the supreme absolute truth. Bhagavad Gita is the evidence of such transcendental knowledge in gist. One cannot know the Supreme Lord unless one is graced by the Lord himself. Lord Krishna exhibited this specific mercy towards Arjuna and Uddhava while he was in the material world. Undoubtedly, Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to encourage Arjuna to fight. And yet, to complete the transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhava. The Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill his mission and disseminate knowledge which he had not spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. Persons who are attached to the words of the Vedas may also know from this verse that the Lord is the source of all Vedic knowledge. One who is unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by going through the pages of the Vedas may take shelter of one of the Lord's devotees, such as Uddhava, in order to advance further in knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahma Samhita says that it is very difficult to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the Vedas, but he is easily understood from the pure devotee like Uddhava. Taking mercy on the great sages who lived at Bhadrashrama, the Lord authorized Uddhava to speak on his behalf. Unless one has such authorization, one cannot understand or preach the devotional service of the Lord. While present on this earth, the Lord executed many uncommon activities, even traveling in space to bring down the Parijata from heaven and recover the son of his teacher, Sandipani Muni, from the regions of death. Uddhava was certainly informed of the conditions of life on other planets, and all the sages were anxious to know of them, just as we are anxious to know about the planets in space. Uddhava was particularly deputed to carry a message to Bhadrashrama, not only to the sages of that place of pilgrimage, but also to the Nara-Narayana deities. Such a message must have been more confidential than the knowledge described in the pages of the Vedas. The Lord is undoubtedly the source of all knowledge, and the messages dispatched through Uddhava to Nara-Narayana and other sages were also part of the Vedic knowledge, but they were more confidential and could be sent or understood only through such a pure devotee as Uddhava. Since such confidential knowledge was known only to the Lord and Uddhava, it is said that Uddhava was as good as the Lord himself. Every living entity can, like Uddhava, also become a confidential messenger on the same level as the Lord, provided he becomes confidential himself by dint of loving devotional service. Such confidential knowledge is entrusted, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, only to pure devotees like Uddhava and Arjuna, and one has to learn the mystery through them and not otherwise. One cannot understand Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam without the help of such confidential devotees of the Lord. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that confidential message must have concerned the mystery of his departure and the annihilation of his dynasty after the end of his appearance in the mundane world for 100 years. Everyone must have been very anxious to know about the mystery of the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, and that message must have been explained by the Lord to Uddhava and dispatched to Bhadrakshama for the information of Narayana and the pure devotees of the Lord. Text 33. Viduro pyuta vachtrutva Krishnasya paramatmana Kridayo patadehesya Karmani slaghitani cha. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Supersoul, in the mortal world, which is a subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Purport. The subject matter of the appearance and disappearance of the Supersoul, Lord Sri Krishna, is a mystery even for the great sages. The word Paramatmana is significant in this verse. An ordinary living being is generally called the Atma, but Lord Krishna is never an ordinary living being because he is Paramatma, the Supersoul. Yet his appearance as one of the human beings and his disappearance again from the mortal world are subject matters for the research workers who execute research work with great perseverance. Such subject matters are certainly of increasing interest because the researchers have to search out the transcendental abode of the Lord, which he enters after finishing his pastimes in the mortal world. But even the great sages have no information that beyond the material sky is the spiritual sky, where Sri Krishna eternally resides with his associates, although at the same time he exhibits his pastimes in the mortal world in all of the universes, one after another. This fact is confirmed in Brahma Samhita 5.37. Goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhuta. The Lord, by his inconceivable potency, resides in his eternal abode, Goloka. Yet at the same time, as the Supersoul, he is present everywhere in both the spiritual and material skies, by his multi-varieties of manifestation. Therefore, his appearance and disappearance are simultaneously going on, and no one can say definitely which of them is the beginning and which is the end. His eternal pastimes have no beginning or end, and one has to learn of them from the pure devotee only, and not waste valuable time in so-called research work. Text 34. Dehanyasam chatasyaivam Dhiranam Dharya Vardhanam Anyesham Duskarataram Pashunam Viklavatmanam. The Lord's glorious acts and his acceptance of various transcendental forms for the performance of extraordinary pastimes in the mortal world are very difficult for anyone other than his devotees to understand. And for the beasts, they are simply a mental disturbance. Purport. The transcendental forms and pastimes of the Lord, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, are difficult subject matters for those who are not devotees to understand. The Lord never reveals himself to persons like the Jnanis and Yogis. And there are others who, because of their envying the Lord from the bottom of their hearts, are classified amongst the beasts, and for such envious beasts, the subject matter of the Lord's appearance and disappearance is simply a mental disturbance, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.15. The miscreants who are simply concerned with material enjoyment, who work very hard like beasts of burden, can hardly know the personality of Godhead at any stage due to Asurika Bhava, or a spirit of revolt against the Supreme Lord. The transcendental bodily expansions manifested by the Lord for pastimes in the mortal world, and the appearance and disappearance of such transcendental expansions are difficult subject matters, and those who are not devotees are advised not to discuss the Lord's appearance and disappearance, lest they commit further offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord. The more they discuss the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord in the Asuric spirit, the more they enter into the darkest region of hell, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 16.20. Anyone who is against the transcendental loving service of the Lord is more or less a beastly creature, as confirmed in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 35. Atmanam cha kurustresta Krishnena manasikshitam dhyayam gate bhagavate uroda prema vivala. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. Purport. Vidura was overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love when he understood that Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of him at the last moment. Although he thought of himself as insignificant, he was remembered by the Lord, by his causeless mercy. Vidura accepted this as a great favor, and thus he cried. This crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. One who can cry for the Lord in love is certainly successful in the line of devotional service. Text 36. Kalindya kati bisidha ahobir paratarseba prapadyata svasaritam yatra mitra sutamuni. After passing a few days on the bank of the river Yamuna, Vidura, the self-realized soul, reached the bank of the Ganges, where the great sage Maitreya was situated. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, fourth chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Vidura Approaches Maitreya. The next chapter, chapter 5, is titled Vidura's Talk with Maitreya, and we will continue from there on Friday. If there's any comments or questions from the devotees. Jai Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the worldwide devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jai Shri Praneem Parikram Adivas Ki Jai. Jai Shringapali Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai.
Jai.
Gangamayi Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Sham Kund Radhakund Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai.
Jai.
Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai. Shri
Jai.
Chaitanya Saraswat Institute Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Mutt Ki Jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanandi Hari 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 Bol.
Hari
Jai
Hari Bol.
Srimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Jai Bhaktilinda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु की जय। दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु।
Dhanavat Pranams. Hari Bol.